I can feel a storm coming, a problematic storm. Welcome to Cook and Book, where I cook very badly while I talk about books. Like every month, I am doing a bunch of book giveaways where I am giving out 2 books that I read this month, Black Buck and Big Summer, along with 5 brand new hardcover books because this video is sponsored by Book of the Month. Book of the Month is a super popular and fast-growing online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books that they love. So every month, their team vets hundreds of thousands of books and curates a selection of 5 titles for you to pick from. They're totally risk-free so that you can skip any month, any time, and you will not be charged. The 5 books that they picked out for this month include The Hunting Wives, a thriller book about Southern belles and an early release title. What Comes After, a contemporary debut about a town struggling after the death of 2 boys. Liberty, a historical novel about a woman fighting to shape her future in 1800s New York City. People We Meet on Vacation, a romance story about 2 idiots in love and are the only ones who don't know about it yet. And Arsenic and Adobo, which is a debut mystery where the main character's ex-boyfriend gets poisoned in her restaurant and everyone thinks that she did it. This would be my personal choice for the month because, first of all, that just sounds like super awkward. And second of all, who doesn't love poisoning men? If you're interested, the giveaway link will be in my description below, but if you would like these books guaranteed, you can sign up for your first box for $9.99 using my code ReadWithCindy. Today, I am making chicken sausage risotto. I have been procrastinating on cooking for like the past week because I just absolutely hate cooking. This video series is literally the only reason why I'm cooking now. Otherwise, all I've been consuming lately is just instant noodles, and like in order to be healthy, I've been taking Ritual vitamins. By the way, they were a sponsor for me a couple of videos ago. I still have the discount if anyone's interested. I would recommend you to talk to a doctor first before you take any vitamins, but they have all their ingredients on their website. So this is an extra plug for Ritual if anyone's interested. And now let's continue our healthy living with whatever crap I'm making today. The recipe here says that I had to preheat the oven to 425 degrees. In that oven, I'm going to put a bunch of garlic cloves in the center of a small piece of foil. And I also need to add tomatoes, but I have to cut them in half lengthwise. Outside of the oven, I am dicing these onions. So the first book that I read this month was Big Summer. It follows this girl who is a plus-size influencer. 6 years ago, she used to be friends with this popular girl who dragged her to some kind of club and tried to arrange her to meet this guy. The friend was forcing the guy to hang out with her and pretend like he was interested in her because the friend just felt so sorry for the main girl. But then the main girl found out that the guy wasn't even interested in her, and the guy was also super rude to her because he doesn't like fat women. So she ends up standing up for herself and telling him off publicly in the middle of the club. Someone ended up recording it. They uploaded it on the internet, and then she became viral from there. And that's how she became a plus-size influencer, because she was able to inspire other fat women to stand up for themselves and embrace their body and beauty. It's kind of a far-fetched way for someone to become an influencer, but you know, there are worse origin stories out there. I mean, imagine becoming an influencer because you made a video about fairy dick and somehow that got 1 million views because people really like to see the same fairy dick jokes over and over. Doesn't make sense to me, but you know, stranger things have happened. Her ex-best friend is also an influencer, of course, but for some reason, as an influencer, she happens to have no friends whatsoever, because when she tries to connect back to the main character, she has a favor to ask, which is to basically have the main character attend her wedding as her maid of honor. The ex-best friend is marrying this guy who was a reality show star, and so the wedding is going to be like this huge thing, and she doesn't want to be embarrassed by the fact that she has no friends. Somehow the main girl ends up agreeing to it anyway, even though that's like a huge red flag if someone has no friends even though they're rich and pretty, which means that she's going to spend the weekend at this beautiful mansion where the wedding is taking place. That is the basic setup of the story. However, I want to note, halfway through the book, there's like this huge turn where the story just takes a completely different direction. It kind of becomes like a murder mystery, but in the end, not much was done with it, which is why I rated it 2 stars. Okay, here's gonna be my little cup for the garlic. We're just gonna plop this in here. I actually think it would be really cool for a book to switch genres halfway through. I actually think it can be pulled off and it can be done really well. It's just that this particular book did not do it well. And the reason why is because it was just clear that the author is more used to writing like a contemporary story and a chick lit story rather than an actual mystery or a thriller. Because when the mystery component kicks in, it doesn't actually feel like a thriller, it just feels like the main character decides to join a Scooby-Doo gang where they go in a van and they go on a road trip with these random side characters to find out who the killer is. And it was just hard to take seriously because the main character is not a detective, but she's doing a very poor job of being one. Even the actual detective is cheesy as hell because he keeps on threatening her and being like, I'm on to you, bitch. And then the actual villain that we get to see is very cartoonish, where they're basically like, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you kids. It was just very unbelievable and confusing. And then by the time I read the ending, I was just like, what was the point of this? The synopsis said that the story was about friendship between women, but it's kind of hard to see that when the book spends most of the time with these two women being very bitchy towards each other. And then all of a sudden we got a murder mystery and we gotta call Scooby-Doo and try to figure it out for ourselves, even though we have no experience with detective work at all. So I'm like, wait, this story was about friendship? Literally where? They don't even like each other. What also didn't help was that I didn't care for any of the characters at all. The main character is very self-deprecating and she is constantly commenting about her weight and comparing herself to others, which I understand is a very common thing for people struggling with body image, but it was just really repetitive to read over and over. And it made me really tired of the fact that you can't seem to read a story about a fat main character without the conflict that she struggles with being her weight. It feels like you can't avoid it, where you read a fat main character and you have to deal with them constantly feeling bad about themselves. And again, I get it, a lot of people actually do feel that way, but I'm so tired of stories where that's literally all the kind of conflicts that you see for fat characters. Like, surely there's other problems other than just being fat. Like, I'm just tired of that being the only story for fat characters. There's a book that I really enjoyed last year called One to Watch, which also has a plus size influencer, and she also deals with body image issues and self-esteem issues. And there were people who were not a fan of the book because of those things. So if you were one of those people who didn't like the book, I feel like you would hate Big Summer even more because it's even more in your face. My justification is that at least in One to Watch, her issues were more purposeful and realistic considering the circumstances that she's in. But then for Big Summer, there wasn't really any purpose to it. Like, I don't really see much character development for her. It just felt like low-hanging fruit for us to read about a fat protagonist who has low self-esteem and body image issues and has to deal with her bitchy frenemy who is of course skinny. It's just so obvious. Like, damn, give us something different. Okay, so I'm gonna put this in the oven for 20 minutes. Speaking of the frenemy, the entire reason the whole plot happens with the main character being convinced to become her bridesmaid is because I guess the frenemy is just so magnetic and has everyone drawn to her. She's just so charming and endearing that you can't help but draw yourself closer to her and say yes to everything that she asks for. But that doesn't make sense because if she were really like that, how come she can't have any real friends to show up to her wedding? As a reader, I didn't buy that she was so charming and alluring at all because it's so clear that she's just like another vapid influencer. There's like no subtlety or nuance with that whatsoever. There are times where the book tries to give her some depth and tries to make her sympathetic by showing that she has like daddy issues where even though she's rich, her dad never paid attention to her. It's so hard being rich and having your parents not pay attention to you. Newsflash, you can be poor and also not have your parents pay attention to you. How about that? The whole relationship between the main character and the frenemy, where they're supposedly friends but they keep on shit talking about each other, just reminds me of white girl drama. Every now and then, I love me some white girl drama. I love to see white on white crime, but this was just basic at best. Also, there's this very weird thing that happens with one of the Asian characters in the story. The main character has a conversation with this Asian character who is complaining about how hard it is to be the only Asian in a predominantly white place. She goes on this whole monologue about how hard her family worked to get her here to America and how important it was to be an American and live the American dream. But certain things had happened in her life where she didn't do so well in school, and now her parents are ashamed of her. Okay, I'm getting teary-eyed from cutting the onions, but this is probably what the Asian character looked like when she went on a whole monologue about the American dream. It's just so sad to have a stereotypical Asian American story. I had to grab the book just so that I can read out loud an excerpt so you know how ridiculous it was. You don't understand what it was like. You can't imagine. My parents came to this country not speaking the language with $500 between them. They paid my father's aunt to take care of me so they could work around the clock in a convenience store. They take turns sleeping in the storage closet so they wouldn't have to pay rent. They told me every single day that it was all for me so I could have an American life, so I could go to a good prep school and an Ivy League college and be a big American success. You don't know what it's like to be one of the only Asian kids at a place like this, to be different, to never fit in. I was a scholarship kid, I interrupted, hoping I could get her to see the similarities between us. What? This bitch was talking about how hard it was for her parents to immigrate from a different country and live in poverty just so that she could have a chance at a better life. And then the main character is like, I was a scholarship kid. And the main character says that she also didn't look like anybody else either, like no one from the popular crew. And then the Asian character replies, you think that means we're the same? You could lose 50 pounds and be just like the rest of them. I could never. To which the main character says, we're all people, I whispered. Huh? That wasn't the issue that you guys were even talking about. She wasn't arguing that you were a fucking lizard. I do know, I said. I promise. Maybe it's not exactly the same, but I know what it's like to be different. And then the Asian character goes on another monologue for 2 pages? 3 pages? 4 pages. Oh my god, this shit went on forever. How long is this fucking conversation? Okay, you know what? You get the idea. Basically, the Asian character was doing a lot. I do think there are some Asian Americans who have had those kinds of experiences, but it was weird to read this in a very exaggerated monologue where this character was so unhinged that she was like screaming and yelling at the main character, and then the main character is like, no, we're all people. I was a scholarship kid. So again, this leads me to the question, what the fuck was the point of this book? Any message that we could have had in the first half of the book, you know, about body positivity or friendship between women or whatever, quickly jumped out the window because the second half was just a fucking mess with the weird mystery Scooby-Doo stuff. The only answer I could think of for what the message the author was trying to go for, based on the main character's self-esteem issues and her frenemy having daddy issues and the Asian character having that weird monologue about the American dream, is that everyone has their own issues and insecurities, and you never know what people are going through because, big surprise, we're all people. Some of us are even scholarship kids. Think about that. Maybe next time you try to judge a white, rich, successful influencer, just remember, she could have gotten a scholarship when she was a kid. Exactly. Gives you a lot to think about. Food for thought, you could say. And then, believe it or not, the next book that I read was even worse. I read a thriller book called The Wrong Family. This is written by the same author as The Wives, which I made a video last year just because that book was such a hot mess. I decided to pick this book up because I'm gonna be honest, I was expecting another hot mess. When I read The Wives, I didn't expect to make a whole video about it. I just happened to decide it once I read through the book and realized what a hot mess it was. So I was thinking, okay, maybe this time I can do this shit on purpose. So the beeping noise in my oven indicates that my food is now ready. I wish there was a beeping noise every time I was about to make a bad decision, because this was one of my bad decisions. I truly feel like I wasted my time reading this book because I'm not even gonna make a video about it. That's what was truly the waste here. In the past, anytime I made a video that was talking about a bad book, oh, shut up. I know I've made bad decisions. I feel like this was worse than The Wives because at least The Wives was bad in a way that so much absurd stuff happened that you couldn't help but want to talk about it. It was like watching a car crash and seeing the flames explode. But then this particular book just felt like a car got in a fender bender, but there's no explosions or fire at all. Like the car is fucked up, but there wasn't anything cool that came out of it. I don't know if this analogy makes sense. It's just one of those books where it was bad, but like it was bad in a boring way because nothing actually happened and you can't even say anything about it because you just have no thoughts whatsoever. No thoughts, head empty. Okay, we're moving over to the stove. I'm gonna heat a drizzle of oil in this pan and then add onion with salt and pepper. So I should probably tell you what the book is actually about. The story is basically like Parasite if it wasn't good and it was written by a white woman. It's about this homeless lady who has been secretly living inside this couple's house. Fun fact, the homeless woman actually used to be a therapist, which is instantly a red flag because if you have watched the video I made on The Wives, this author has not been the best with representing mental health. So when I found out that the main character used to be a therapist that diagnosed people that used to have schizophrenia and other mental illnesses, I was like, oh no, I can feel a storm coming, a problematic storm. So this lady is just chilling and hiding in this family's house, but one day she overhears a conversation between the wife and the husband. It's a conversation that implies that the couple did something really, really bad in the past that they have tried to cover up, but they still remember the very bad thing that they did. I can't say what it is, otherwise it would be spoilers, but honestly, I feel like it wasn't even that dramatic. Again, I'm just comparing this to The Wives, which was a wild roller coaster. What actually happens is like, I didn't expect the story to be good, but I was at least hoping it would be really bizarre and shocking, just like The Wives was. Because The Wives was so over the top that it was kind of like entertaining. Like I had fun making the video because it was just so ridiculous. But then the stuff that happens here, there's really no big shocking plot twist. Mental illness does get used as a plot device so that bad things can happen. And once again, that's like another problematic thing that the author tends to do. But it's not even entertaining like the way The Wives did it. Like, damn, if you're gonna be problematic, at least be entertaining so that we can have something to talk about. Now this shit is just stupid. The story was just really slow. It was meandering a lot. It felt pointless a lot of the time. The characters were all flat. Mental illness was used as a plot device, but it wasn't even used in like an entertaining way where we could make fun of it. It was just like, come on, dude. So this is one of the books where I truly feel like I wasted my time. And I don't even feel that way when I read a bad book. Because at least when I read a bad book, I never feel like I actually wasted my time because I think, well, at least I have something to rant about on this channel. Maybe I can make a video about it. Everyone has a good laugh and we all have fun. Unfortunately, this is not the case because this story was just so boring, it's not even worth making a video about. So it truly felt like a waste of time. The lesson of the story is it's not worth it to pick up a book that you think you can make a video about because you don't know if it's actually going to be worth making a video about. I think I'm going to continue what I always do, which is just find bad books accidentally and then probably make a video from there. Or if my friend gives me a book that they want me to rant about, like A Court of Silver Flames, then I will make a video about that. But that's not out of my own will, okay? That's just because my friend sent that to me because she really wants to see a video. So yes, for everyone who is asking me, you are gonna get A Court of Silver Flames as its own separate video. I'm in the middle of reading it this month. I haven't finished it because this bitch is like 700 pages, but it is coming and I have written a lot of notes about it. Actually, you know what? That's the kind of book that I can talk about. That shit has material. There's tons of stuff that I took notes down and I was like, oh, I definitely gotta talk about this. But The Wrong Family, what a snooze fest. Honestly, this author needs to take notes from Sarah J Maas because she is the queen of giving us some juicy stuff to talk about in a YouTube video. We stan. Hi, so my camera ran out of battery, which means that I had to film the rest of my cooking on my phone. Here is a classic shot of my phone falling. We haven't had that in a while. The recipe says to break up the meat into pieces, which is why I am gripping the spatula very viciously. You do this for 4 to 5 minutes and then you stir in orzo. You cook and stir that until it's lightly toasted for 2 to 3 minutes. So the next book that I read was Black Buck. This is a debut novel about a young working Black professional who gets roped into this startup that is almost like a cult because everyone is like, we need to make the most sales. We need to vow allegiance to this amazing startup. We're gonna change lives and disrupt the tech industry. If you have ever worked in tech or worked in advertising, this is pretty much how the industry is. Here I am adding 2 cups of water, then a large pinch of salt, and then stock concentrate into the pan. The story starts off with the main character who works at a Starbucks. He is super smart, but he's very unambitious, which is why he had never really applied himself to do anything bigger than just working at Starbucks. But one day he gets recruited by this guy who is the CEO of New York City's hottest tech startup. And as the main guy joins the sales sales team, he finds out that he is the only black person in the entire company. He has to endure this hell week of training, which is basically a bunch of white men screaming into his face. It reminds me a lot of hazing at fraternities. There is a lot of bro culture going on, and the book is about him getting wrapped up into this wild workplace and industry. I rated this book 2 stars. I really wanted to like the book, and I feel like the beginning had started off strong, but the second half was where it really lost me, where I just realized I didn't care about the story anymore. It got increasingly absurd and the pacing was all over the place. I think an excuse that you could apply to this is that the story is satire, but I don't think that satire can just be used as an excuse for making up a whole bunch of things that don't make any sense. I think it still needs to be grounded within reality. Satire has to be used in a way to explore themes in a deeper and thought-provoking way, which I don't think this book quite achieved. I actually think that the messaging of this book was super obvious to the point where it kind of just slaps you in the face, but then it also gets convoluted with a lot of over-the-top slapstick and jokes that don't really work. It just very much felt like jokes that a dude bro in the early 2000s would make. And again, with the deeper messages, I think that the book kind of glossed over it, which is a shame because I think there is a lot to explore with the way that people of color, especially black people, are treated within advertising and the tech industry. And I say this as someone who does work in that kind of industry and has dealt with a lot of microaggressions and racism. But instead of the book breaking down these issues, the weird thing about it is that it seems to give this solution, which is to just simply hire more people of color. And I guess that just solves things. This just feels like a very surface level interpretation for how you can solve those issues. Just because you hire a bunch of people of color, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden now we have equality. Because the issue is just not the lack of diversity, it's also the fucking industry in the first place that perpetuates the kind of toxic environment that they are in. I opened the oven and I took out the garlic and roasted tomatoes. I am supposed to mash it with a fork until it's smooth, but I used a knife instead. I don't know why I always use a knife instead of like a regular utensil, but I feel like it would have the same effect as a fork, right? I don't know, whatever. I tried my best. I mean, I didn't really try my best, but you know. And you can really tell that a dude is writing this book because there were barely any women in the book, but the ones that were present in the book were just regulated into archetypes. It's very predictable because you see him getting integrated into this toxic startup culture, and you see how that makes him ostracize the people that were in his life and the people that kept him grounded. So he ostracizes the girlfriend who is there to teach him lessons like, you're not the same anymore, you used to be a good guy, this is it, I'm breaking up with you. And so that's supposed to like open his eyes to how much of a jerk he is. You have his mom who is trying to spout wise life lessons to him, and she's also very sick, but he doesn't realize how sick she is until later on when he hits rock bottom because he was so absorbed into his work life. These two women are just plot devices for him to realize how much of a jerk he is. Both women are just there to teach him lessons so that he can develop his own character, but not really to develop their own characters. The way that this work culture treats women of color is a whole deeper layer to the conversation. So the fact that this book didn't even include any women of color's perspective in this book is kind of ironic for the industry that they're supposed to critique. Once the orzo is tender, I turned off the heat and I stirred in the mashed garlic along with some butter, cream cheese, and half the Parmesan until it was combined and creamy. I don't know if it was actually creamy, but we gotta work with what we got, okay? I know all the books I've gone over this past month have been a flop, but fortunately, the last one that I read this month will save us all because I read A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. I rated this 4 stars and I really enjoyed the way that the story was both whimsical and very depressing at the same time. The story is coincidentally about an author named Ruth who is living on a remote island, and she finds this diary that washes up on the shore. The diary is written by a 16-year-old girl who lives in Tokyo. She has been the victim of a lot of harsh bullying, and harsh is an understatement because the bullying that happens throughout the book was something that seriously made me uncomfortable. Like, Japanese kids are on a whole nother level. They bully her in ways that are both violent and also psychological. Like, there's this one one part where the whole school decides to pretend that she's dead, and they pretend to hold a funeral for her by dressing up in all black and putting like a framed portrait at her desk and pretending to grieve, which is so fucked up on a whole nother level that American kids could never be able to top that. There's also a lot of issues going on in her home as well, because her father is very depressed and he has attempted to commit suicide multiple times. What's disheartening is that every time he survives a suicide, they don't really acknowledge the fact that he tried to kill himself. And the strange thing about it is that because it is written through the voice of a 16-year-old girl, it's not written super tragically. It still has this lighthearted tone that she's writing in. And as you deal with her life getting increasingly more depressing, like her getting involved into sex work or even her contemplating suicide herself, you sense this disconnect between her lighthearted voice and the very serious topics that she's talking about. It reminds me a lot of like my therapy sessions with my therapist. I think it's realistic. I am impressed that the author has successfully done, because she is a much older woman, but she is able to pull off this 16-year-old girl treating these very serious issues of depression and suicide, being like, yeah, another day where I want to die. But it's not in a way that diminishes those issues. It's in a way that accurately reflects how younger generations, including my generation, kind of approaches these things. I'm someone who has also talked about trauma and depression in a very lighthearted way, or even in a joking way, because it's just the way that our weird fucked up brains will try to process it, because it's more bearable to talk about it in a lighthearted way than to actually embrace the severity of it. So I thought that the voice throughout this book was very compelling and realistic. The character that we follow of this 16-year-old girl has so much personality to her too. She is so spunky, she has such a strong personality, and I love the way that she interprets the world around her. Even aside from all of the dark themes, I think her perspective on the world is very unique and lyrical in a way that made me really enjoy just hearing her thoughts on life. The reason why I didn't rate this 5 stars is because even though this girl's voice was so strong, the other main character, who is Ruth, is not that great of a story to follow on. It kind of drags the story because you're also following Ruth half the time. Ruth is just there as a device for you to discover this girl, and there's not much going on in her story. Her voice isn't as strong, there's not much of a plot going on from her side of things, and there wasn't much to care about for her end. But I still think that this is a very solid book. Again, I love the combination of whimsy and depression, because we love a little spin on depression. Just add a little bit of whimsy to it for the flavor. So I divided the risotto between plates, and I added the roasted tomatoes and Parmesan on top, and here is the finished result. I did not film myself eating this, but to tell you the results, I did not enjoy eating this at all. It was too salty. I did try to salvage it by adding a lot of red peppers to it. In the end, I ordered takeout instead. So this recipe was a flop. I hope you unsubscribe from my channel, and goodbye.
Ooh, that's my violet boy.